Good morning, everyone. It's the Sick of This Show with Nick Perro, Frederick Pogue, and Ellie Leonard. I would say special guest, but
Yeah.
she's co-host. Not she's not just special guest, but she's side host with us. So now we're tri-hosting.
Okay.
Try hosting.
Um,
I'm really
and
excited for the day when we can have these, when Substack ups their tech game and we can have these like one of those giant Zoom calls with like 100 people. You know what I mean? I think that's coming and I'm super excited for it.
That's
I'm
the
excited for
restream stuff that's in the works. It's not
it.
there yet. If you can, I would actually suggest is get your restream key if you have it available, is start like have that set up. Because I have restream set for Sick of This show, and um one of the best episodes, actually the highest views I've had on YouTube was your show. It was
Oh,
one of those shows with you on it when we did the live. Um,
cool.
and I think if we can try and get to streaming to multiple audiences, and if we can figure out how to get it to stream on TikTok, that would be freaking cool.
I, I gotta tell you, speaking of like, the highest, all that good stuff. If you guys haven't subscribed to Ellie Leonard and my man Nick Parle here, you're missing out. You were missing on like some of the best value on Substack because Ellie Leonard just keeps dropping pieces that are just well written and well researched, and it's like, damn, it's like ever since I discovered her, because through Nick, I'm just like, man, my save for later queue has built up. Like I've got like a textbook worth of. I feel like I'm back in college, where it's like, man, I got all this required reading I got to get done. But
I
it's
need
so
to know how to
good.
do all these things. Like people are telling me all these things are available. I'm like, I've never even heard of Save for Later. What are you even talking about?
Right.
I need to
Oh
I
yeah,
just sit
there's
there.
that little
I'm like
banner on it that you can hit.
I'm just like an
Bottom left
old
corner.
school I'm like an old person in a not quite old person's body, like to where I'm just like, I'm just here and I'm writing essays and then I just click send and then I just shut everything down and walk away and I don't know what happened. So like all the tech stuff that people are like, you can restream. I'm like, what's a restream? Like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Maybe you do that and I'll just like go along. I don't know.
See, Ellie, this is what, and that's the great thing. And it's funny that you say that because that's one of the things I love about this is like, I love explaining complex tech problems in very simple
Mhm.
ways because that was my job for a while.
Right, right.
I was a senior DevOps engineer, which for those who don't know what that means is I did senior development operations for software companies where I built cloud platforms to host and deploy software from. So if you were trying to run an operating system for like some sort of server
Hmm.
that you might run, like Netflix or something like that would be a good example, is run on something that I would have been able to build and launch. So that was the cool stuff that
Hmm.
I did. Um, but the big thing that I loved about it wasn't always the software. Sorry, I actually like building things.
Hmm.
And so I used it as like, oh, I like building and connecting things together. And there's a cool law that I suggest everybody find. It's called Conway's Law. Um, it's the law that systems are built in the manner in which your communication systems are structured,
Hmm.
um, and how you communicate. And I love the fact that we can do this because you don't have to know all the tech stuff for us to be able to manage this. Like, I can do tech shit. Fred can do the talent. Like, Fred is the talent half the
your
time
your
and
job
the
is
producer.
talent.
Fred is
And then I'm
Fred
just
is
gonna
talent.
show up.
Ellie Ellie is our investigative talent journalist because she's got both the investigative side and she'll come on and she'll just be like, "Yeah, I fucking got you. We'll do a show."
Yeah, like when he says talent, I just want everybody to know I'm like the Ed McMahon of this stuff. When she starts launching
Awesome.
on the Epstein files, I'm just like, yes, you know, release them. You know,
Release the files.
you know, you are
I'm really
correct, ma'am. They should be released. You know,
And I'm just like, I'm really good at filling quiet, empty spaces with chattiness. Like when people talk about, I don't know if you guys all learned this. I grew up going to church, and like one of the things, and that could be another conversation. I went to Mars Hill, if you guys have ever heard of Mars Hill, like Mark Driscoll, like Pastor
yeah,
Mark
I have
Driscoll.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a story. But like
Wait,
one
you
of the
were in a
things that we
cult?
I mean, technically not a cult, but yeah, cult, yeah.
Mm, mm.
I was in there for a very short period of time. It was while we were living in Seattle. But anyway, be
Ooh, I
that
got
as it
so
may.
many questions now.
Yeah.
I almost joined a
But
cult
one of the
too.
things.
Well, I
Oh,
bet
well,
we
that's
have. Yeah, this is gonna be fun. We're gonna do it. We should do a cult episode now.
okay.
Yeah.
But my point being is, I was like, we taught about like love languages. Like everybody has their love language. Like some people like gifts, some people like activities, some people like time. My love language is actually like language. I just love to just sit in a room and have a conversation and a cup of coffee, and I can just hold the floor for hours, or just not say anything and listen to somebody else talk. And like I could do that all day. So these could run long. This morning you're
No,
asking.
I fucking love it. That's so much fun
Okay.
because the great thing about the love languages thing that you were just talking about,
Hmm.
that's literally the basis of how the military does their like marriage training for soldiers is literally based on the love languages.
Marriage
Like we
training. That
went to
sounds sketchy.
we no, it's so it's you say it's sketchy, but it's not
Hmm.
in that we do like marriage retreats and like singles retreats because
Right.
military life can be pretty lonely if you don't actually get
Hmm.
forced to go do things. And so they encourage you as families and as spouses without your kids to go and like go on a spouses trip. That's actually one of the ways my wife and I met and got to know each other really well is we went on a singles retreat together. And as my wife says, it's a one night stand that lasted for now over 10 years. Um, and I was the one night stand that
Right.
lasted. I was the catch and throw away.
Right.
But I never left.
That's
We'll have
awesome.
that story too. Uh,
Yeah.
and but they have these incredible retreats where they actually teach you, but it's often led by the chaplain or groups like that, because those are the ones who are taught in the military to actually non-denominationally lead a service like that and lead those
Hmm.
sorts of things and events. They don't. They often preach it. Like one of ours, they like preach the to us like you should get the book Jesus was an airborne ranger. And I was like, no thanks. He
Yeah.
fucking was not. I'm Jewish. That's
You're like, that doesn't
no
work for
thanks.
me.
Yeah, that's we nah, negative Ghost Rider.
Trigger can't stop.
Why is everything
But
have
that
come on, everything does not have to go back to that, right?
no,
Like,
it
Yeah.
doesn't. But the love languages thing is a thing that they use so heavily. And that was something that my wife and I learned how to, we still use that language, those
Yeah.
mm,
terminologies. Because as
Yeah.
bad as that, like the undercurrent of the cult that he built was, like,
Hmm.
yeah, and the fact that he wasn't a licensed psychologist or marriage
Yeah. No.
counselor
No.
or
Yeah.
trained in any fucking way, he did put it in words that are communicable. And that's
Right.
why I think it caught on. It was like they were catchy words that are easy to understand. And people are like, oh my God, yeah. Like, I love when my husband gives me gifts or tells me
Right.
things that are nice. And I know my husband loves when he doesn't get touched all the time or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Things like they were easy to
Everybody has
understand
their
and they caught
version.
on.
Yeah.
my,
Um,
so this is coming from somebody who was in the army. And so I was in the Marine Corps. So we get much less. So my love language is just a series of grunts, you know,
that's
it's
a
just,
Marine thing.
yeah. But it tends to break down
I
into like,
believe it.
it tends to break down into like simian love language where it's just like grunts and, oh, oh,
Hmm.
and then we just kind of, bang our fists at things. And, so it hasn't worked out well for me. I'm trying to learn how to speak, like that's pretty much where my love language is with women, where, I'm like, I'll hand them a flower and then just, be like, you like,
Mutate.
it's like, I'm like one of those, the simians from Congo. It's like, you want get alcohol, drink drop, that kind of thing.
Mine is like, do you want to leave the house and not talk to anybody for 8 hours? And I'm just like, yes, 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 that's all I want. I want to not see you or anyone and just not talk to anyone. And then I'm like, thank you. And that's my love. Or like worst case scenario, I don't like really cliche stuff. I don't like the flowers and the chocolate strawberries. I hate chocolate strawberries. Um, but I like when I come home and like the dishes got put away. I'm just like,
Oh,
oh.
it's so awesome.
Or like I didn't have to cook. Someone told me once like their favorite food was food they didn't have to cook, and I was like, yes,
Yeah.
I'll eat anything. I'll eat off the floor. I would eat anything if I didn't have to cook it. Like that's delicious. So yeah, there's a lot of versions of it probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know.
It's so funny that you said that though about like your love language is I want to be left alone for 12 hours. Please let me go somewhere. We literally used to, my wife and I we'd send her alone to Barnes and Noble for an entire day.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
wouldn't let
And the ones that have couches, those are the
where
best.
there was a the cafe, you could sit down, she could like she got to get whatever books she read books
Yeah.
all freaking we just let her go. I was like, nobody is bothering her. We did that when we used to live in Washington. Um and it was so healthy for her because she got away from us. And it was when our kids were littler. Plus it was COVID time, so nobody was in
Right.
the library and she could just sit there and she's like,
Yeah.
it's
Well, that's
quiet.
why I go to New York sometimes because, like, it sounds kind of funny to say you go to New York to get away from people, but like in New York, it's nobody who knows you and it's nobody who needs anything. It's kind of the
Yeah.
needing you, from people and the why, lots of why questions. Like, I don't get any of that in New York. That amount of people walking by me on the sidewalk when I've got my music on or whatever is just like white noise. It's like walking around with like a fan on, and it's so cathartic for me. And I'll walk 10 miles around New York City in a day and just like be like, oh, bookstore, I'm going to stop in there. Oh, coffee, I'm going to grab that. And it's just like everything's spontaneous and amazing. And yeah, it's good for me.
No, honestly, like I totally get what you're saying because I was like, I'm just coming out of being a caregiver for my sister and my mother for like the last 5 years. And so you going somewhere where no one needs anything from you and you can just kind of sit and be
Yeah.
fucking
It's
amazing.
so freeing.
It's amazing.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
it's just
nice
like,
not being needed.
Or it's a different kind of
oh my
needing.
God, it's so awesome.
But
Right.
not
Like
because I don't like being needed at home, but it's like I don't want to be needed by anybody. Like you said,
Right.
like walking through a crowd of people, I don't like doing that because it makes me really nervous to go through large crowds of people in big spaces like that.
Same.
I deployed.
Same. Don't let it.
I went to a place that was colloquially named Rocket City because they used to just
Yeah.
hammer us with rockets all the time. I don't like big crowds, but that's my own problems. But I like the idea of like walking through a forest alone. Like that is so freeing and calming because nobody can talk to you, nobody wants you. Like with my dogs nearby, like just running with me, so free. You have nobody who cares.
Amazing.
I want to get back to some of the stuff in the chat for a second before we get too far. But I'd love to have sort of just like a what's new for everybody sort of day.
Well, I just saw a drop down from the Washington Post that Donald Trump is no longer being held accountable for $500 million in his fraud case. They appealed it, and I guess they overturned it. That's what just popped down. So that's, good morning.
That was to Eugene. Wait, was that the
No, that's not the Eugene.
No, that was the fraud.
That was
for
the New York
Letitia
fraud case.
James.
Yeah, Eugene, he's on the hook.
Seriously, they proved that so fucking thoroughly.
Matter.
So thoroughly. Like, and that's a New York civil case.
Yeah. It's who knows.
Nothing matters.
Who knows
if
why they overturned
that? Is corruption. That is corruption.
What?
So, what we got to call it out.
That never happens.
I was talking about this with Shane Yerrick yesterday. Was we got to use words correctly, and we got to powerfully call these things out. Like he was talking about lobbying, and I was like, no, hold on, let's stop. That's how right-wing people talk about it, and that's how corporatists talk about it. What it really is built-in corruption and bribery. They're bribing our politicians to make policies that are anti-human and killing us. Anyway, I want to go back to the chat for a second before we get too far into that story. That sounds fucking awful. Fucking hate this. I hate this country sometimes. Going to Gen X's show this morning with Dana Dubois and Lawrence Winterman, I was in the chat, and Lawrence said something that caught me that I want to make sure that he caught, that I said back to him, because he was doubting himself, I think. I don't know in your internal thoughts, but externally, bud, it looked like you were doubting yourself and what you're doing. And I want you to know that just because you're stuck here doesn't mean you're not brave and you're not courageous for doing the thing that you're doing. Like you are standing up when so many other people aren't. And Lawrence Winterman is somebody you should follow. He is a
Yeah.
sci-fi writer. He is motivated. He's a patriot. He's brave. He has courage. And I think he needs to not doubt himself for that courage, for staying and saying things while he's stuck here. And it's okay that you're stuck here and that you want to leave, but doing it, bravery is and courage are doing the act, even though fear is there and because you know it's the right thing to do. So
Yeah.
I just want to make sure you don't question yourself, brother, because you have found banner and backbone. And you're calling yourself, you're questioning your bravery right now, brother. Don't do that. I question myself all the time. Imposter syndrome is real. Don't fucking do it, man. You're a patriot and you're killing it.
Yeah,
So,
here's the thing, man. It's like I don't care where you're at. You know, I've done a lot of stuff in my life. You know, I've messed up in so much shit. Like I've oh man, I messed up a marriage. I messed up a career. Like every single thing that I've transitioned from never ended the way I wanted it to or thought it would, for good and bad. And I barely know what I'm doing half the time. You know, I'm constantly, basically my entire life, I'm failing forward. I question everything that I do of whether I'm good enough, if I'm putting in enough effort, if it's the right effort.
mhm,
Man, honestly, what I've learned, if there's any kind of grace to be found with any of this stuff, is you're doing the work. And that's it.
mhm,
How it works out is how it's gonna work out. I don't know how all this is gonna go. And it's natural to be like, yo, I want to get the hell out of here. You know, we just talked about opening up in this segment of people like, man, I just want to go somewhere and not be needed. You know, in the military, we call
mhm,
it pop and smoke. You just want to pop smoke, get the hell away, and just like, because you want, like, you're overwhelmed, man. You're just like, it'll get to you. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't say anything about you. It just says you're human. That's it.
But like
Every
look at the
everybody
flip
deals with
side.
this.
What the flip side of that looks like if you don't have the humility and you don't have the recognition of mistakes made and you don't have the recognition or the ownership of doing things wrong and struggling and making mistakes, then you get a person like Donald Trump. Then you get a person like Stephen Miller or JD Van. You get these people who are like, nope, everything's fine and I'm great. And I have nothing to feel bad about and my life is amazing and yours sucks. Like, what does that look like on the flip side? It's pretty terrible. And I think objectively, I don't think anybody of us, like any one of us, wants to go there, right?
Nope.
no, nope.
So I'm happy being a dumpster fire, right? Because it keeps my feet on the ground and it keeps me able to sleep at night because I recognize that I'm a dumpster fire and I'm always working towards something. I never want to hit the top. I never want to think that I've hit the top because then
Mhm.
what do you have left, right? That's pretty depressing. So, yeah,
What
lots of problems and mistakes, but it's
Life is a
life. That's life.
journey.
well,
Life's
even
a journey and we learn. Like you don't the saying is like I what is it about like death is like you like it's you're avoiding death. Something about like you only live once.
Hmm.
But it's you live every day. Like every day
Hmm.
is a journey. Like the whole point, one of the things
YOLO.
Jacob YOLO or carpe diem or any of those old phrases. Jacob Summers and I were talking about it on our show the other day, and where we sort of opened up about some stuff. And I'm more open up because I'm going through a rough mental patch right now, and I'm trying to fix myself and
oh
heal.
man,
Um, and we'll talk about it, Fred. We'll talk on some shows. I'll bring Jake on because it was fun.
because yeah, I'm yeah, same, bro.
And
Like,
so I want to lead into like what Jake and I were saying though, is like you got to be vulnerable and you got to be willing to make mistakes, but it's all about learning, like learning every day, something new. Like he asked me like, why do I do it? Or what do I do to keep going or keep making myself a little better each day is I try and learn one thing new and I write is whatever form of writing it is poetry, long form music, audio, like speaking it out and getting it written transcript, as long as you putting it down, journaling, like write something because it makes you feel good because you process it, and do
Right.
it at the towards the end of the day because then you're processing your whole day. Um, and so leading into, as I like to do my transition, I'm trying to learn how to be a host on shows now too. Is
Sure.
what was your guys' favorite piece that you've written this week? And what was y'all's favorite piece each?
Oh, I'm still working on a piece right now, but I'm actually
Oh, doesn't have to be published.
yeah, no. Oh, so man, I'm doing development notes for my business partner on a script. So I'm going through that on a feature film. And then I'm writing a piece in response to Julian Michaels. And it's gonna turn into a longer piece. So and if you'll grant me the space to do this, I'll launch a little bit on it.
Hell yeah.
So first of all, this notion that slavery wasn't as bad has been insidious with us pretty much since the start of the 20th century. The reason we have all these Stone Mountain in Georgia, all these Confederate landmarks, all these Confederate streets, all the reason the bases that you hear about that were named after Confederate Fort Bragg, like Fort Lee, all that was purposefully by the Jim Crow South around the start of the 20th century to whitewash the Civil War. That's where it started to be called the War of Northern Aggression. That's where it started to be called. It was about states' rights, but they never mentioned which state right. Right? Well, it wasn't really about slavery; it was about states' rights. No, no, no. You can go back if you guys are really interested in this. In the first, it was called Battle Cry of Freedom, written by James McPherson, one of the preeminent authors on the American Civil War for history. Is It was absolutely about slavery. The Confederates made no bones about that whatsoever. And the all this whitewashing even goes to things about Robert E. Lee, right? Kindly Marsh Roberts, who was just a Southern gentleman and he was just so gentle and he had to secede for Northern Virginia. Let me tell you a little about Robert E. Lee. All right. And this is part of the piece I'm writing. Is Robert E. Lee was a fucking sadist. He was a horrible, okay? So when his father-in-law died, his wife got slaves that he put in his will that they would be freed for 5 years, after 5 years, right? 5 years after his death. Why did he do that? Oh, because there were there were laws against you freeing all your slaves upon your death, because that was actually a custom that harkened back to the Roman times. And a lot of those people, like our founding fathers back then, were all Greek, Greco-Roman files, right? So that was a common practice until the early part of the 19th century, when you had some wild ass shit, when it's like there was a state legislature, who married his slave, who basically said, you know what? I got religion, you know, I'm an abolitionist now. I'm freeing all my slaves and I'm marrying a black woman. And the white supremacists said, oh shit, we can't have that. So you can't free your slaves. It's only under these conditions that you can actually do it. So Robert E. Lee gets these slaves from his father-in-law. 5 years pass, right? So it's 1857. During the Civil War is 1862. They leave because they said, hey, we were told we would get freed in 5 years. Robert E. Lee brings them back. This is from an account from a man named Wesley Norris, who was a slave at the time. He had them brought out to his barn, got a scourge, and wanted the overseer to lash the men 50 times and the women 20. And it got so bad, the overseer said, I can't do this no more. So then Robert E. Lee called out the sheriff to have him do it, to finish it, and did it some of himself. And then had them put vinegar brine on the slaves' wounds at the end of it. And so we're not taught this, because of people like Jillian Michaels and people like Donald Trump in the Smithsonian. All of this is a purposeful attack. So we don't have to, it was like, well, I don't understand why black folks are so upset. I don't understand why we need affirmative action because, it's never been that bad. No. It was worse than you were taught. It was worse. I'm telling you. As someone who studied history and critical race theory, it was worse. And it's out there. The documents are out there. The primary sources are out there. We have accounts from slaves who lived through it. They're out there. And it's the same shit with the Epstein files. We have the accounts from the women who suffered, and they're being suppressed for a reason.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my
Go, Fred's
highlight.
down. See, that was a perfect time for the camera to fall down too. That was a good
The
range.
camera went, oh Lord,
Done.
Oh shit, we're done.
oh Lord.
Jesus is real. He has come back.
Fred.
Sorry to offend, not to offend any of y'all in my crowd, but for the far righters, Jesus has been nailed up again.
But this is when we deny our history, man. It's like, why are they tearing down our heritage? It's not heritage. It was about hatred. That's why Stone Mountain exists. That's why all these Confederate statues exist. It was terrorism to cow black people into subservience. That's why they had public lynchings. That's why they had all this stuff.
That's why our bases are named after Confederate generals, because they needed to advocate to hillbilly rednecks for World War II and World War I so that they would join the U.S. Army, because they didn't want to. They were fucking hillbillies who were like, nah, we don't want to do this because there are black people in there. And that was their excuse. And then the U.S. was like, you know what? How about we rename some bases from their historical names and give them your Confederate general names? Will that make you happy? And they did. And now we're fucking fighting back to have those. Now they're coming back. Now those names are back after we changed them away from the racist names, because the racists were like, oh shit, we're not welcome anymore. And the U.S. Army was like, or government was like, nope, you're not welcome anymore. So we're going to just, change them back so you are welcome. It's fucking blatant dog whistles that we don't ever think about. It's why all these people's faces are carved into fucking statues on the sides of mountains. So you go there and you visit and go, oh, look at this pretty statue that was built by a fucking Klansman.
Yeah,
I have to say.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I have a lot of family who live in Nashville and thereabouts, and we've gone back and forth and visited quite a few times. We decided to go move down there, my husband and I, after we got married, and we just thought it would be a nice adventure. And I have to say, as a soft northerner who grew up in the Pacific Northwest, I was not prepared for the racism that we were met with there. Like, racist against cultures that I didn't even think that people were racist against, like Irish people and like Asian people, and like, a lot of we're not racist. We're not racist against Hispanics. We just, when they moved into the neighborhood, things went to shit and we put bars on our windows. Like just really, really racist stuff where I was like, that's not normal. And then I remember we were watching the news one day. It was just the local news. And there was a story about a guy stealing a car or something. And he was a black guy. And while they're telling the story, that's a very minimal story, they had somehow with graphics decapitated his head and had it bouncing across the bottom of the screen as they were telling the story. And my husband goes, what the fuck did we just watch? Like, did they just decapitate that man's head? Like, as like a graphic while they're and it's on the news. And it was so wild. Like, I had never experienced that in my life. And I get that there's racism in the Northwest, but I think we're very sheltered because the diversity up there tends to be more Asian, like a lot of Asian countries and a lot of like the tech sector. And so it's like that, when you hear about like with the immigration issues with Donald Trump, you hear about the good colored people versus the bad colored people. And it has to do with who's contributing to like billion-dollar tech and who is not. And so we dealt with a lot of that, right? We didn't see a lot of the racism because we were the good colored people up there, right? They were doing all the Amazon and the tech and all that stuff. And so when I moved somewhere that actually had blatant racism where like now what we're seeing in the Trump administration where people are not they're unafraid of being racist, right? It's not socially unacceptable and you're just seeing it. It was shocking. It was really shocking and it made me have to rethink how I was approaching the world and what I was reading and what I was paying attention to because I had just been sheltered. I'd been sheltered my entire life from it.
Well, and
But
it's I
yeah,
mean, it's the racism in the South was institutionalized,
Hmm.
right? And even words that we don't use that like are not in our parlance anymore that at one time existed were I mean, the race we're not talking about people side eye you in the store in the store or, like no, no, no. We're talking about words like octoroon and mulatto and even red bone. All that
Hmm.
stuff comes from how much white blood is supposedly in a black body, right?
mm,
Hmm.
And so again, how did that white blood get in a black body?
Hmm.
I'll leave, it's pretty
yeah. Let's
self-explanatory.
let's leave that question
Hmm.
open.
Yeah, like it's pretty
Yep.
self-explanatory because the thing what people don't really understand, again, because we're not taught this, and how American slavery differed from everywhere else. So in the Caribbean and the colonies, because they still had the transatlantic slave trade, is they imported primarily men, and it was backbreaking work in tropical environments that killed off a lot of people with disease. So it's brutal work, people are dying, and there's no women. So you had a shit ton of rebellions. But what happened with American slavery? Again, we're talking about unintended consequences. Abolitionists in the North said, "Hey, we'll do the three-fifths clause," right? Because the Southerners said, "Well, no, we want to count every single black slave we have as part of the population census. We're not going to do that." So they did the three-fifths clause. But part of that was we're going to get rid of the transatlantic slave trade. What that did was transform American slavery. So women became part of that equation. Why? Because they could produce more slaves because we weren't importing them. So then what did they do? How did you keep like we had Nat Turner and we had stuff like that, but not nearly as many slave rebellions as they had in South America or they had in the Caribbean. Why? Because hey, I ain't gonna beat you, pissed off black man. I'm gonna beat your wife. I'm gonna beat your kids. I'll separate your family from you. And it was used as a means of control. American slavery was its own unique horribleness. I've studied
Is
it.
its own unique horribleness still.
Yes. I
Redlining is part of that tradition.
Yep.
Jails and prison systems and the prison complex are parts of slave tradition. Sheriffs and a lot of our police forcing is based on slave tradition.
Hmm.
We have to, it was all about control and taking and telling men that like Fred said, I'm gonna beat your family. I'm gonna separate you. I'm gonna move you to a different house. I'm gonna move you to a different farm. I'm gonna sell you. I'm gonna make you cattle or chattel. I'm gonna sell your wife instead of you, or I'm gonna sell your kid, or I'm gonna do the thing to your daughter or your wife that you wish you could kill me for and you can't because I'm the white man and I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Hmm.
And that's
Because
how we,
it's not about just it's like you might get to a place where you say, okay, well, you kill me, I don't give a damn. I'm gonna rebel against you, my oppressor. It's not about you now. They're gonna harm your wife. They're gonna harm your kids.
Mhm.
They're gonna harm your grandkids. They're gonna abuse them in horrible. They're gonna break you, right? And then I'm just touching into part of the practices that were used to cow and again, well, yeah, but why are we still talking about this? Because this is what you'll hear too. Why are we still talking about this? It's not like
Yeah.
that anymore.
I don't see
Okay,
color.
Yeah,
let,
it's
let me
not
let me
like
go
that
ahead and
anymore. Yeah,
like
the
in
fuck
in
it
the
is.
the liberal state of California, the San Diego Chargers recently, like a few years ago, when I was living there, they moved to Los Angeles, right? So there's a place outside of LA, not too far. It's called Irvine. It's in Orange County. Okay. You have NFL players, National Football League. Okay. NFL players making NFL salary. The league minimum was like $700,000, right? Okay. Their family they couldn't, the black players, a lot of them could not get apartments because of redlining that is still going on in California. It's not talked about, right? But it's like, you're talking immaculate credit scores, money, like no problem. Celebrity status. You play for the Chargers, an NFL team, one of 32, can't get an apartment.
It was the Raiders that moved to Las Vegas for
No. I'm talking
like
about Los Angeles. Los
yeah,
Angeles.
yeah, yeah. No, somebody said in the chat, thought they had moved to Vegas. Different team.
Yeah, the
The
Raiders did.
Raiders moved to Vegas.
The Raiders used to be in LA. They went from Oakland to LA, back to Oakland, and then to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And so, like,
But even that, even you think about a couple years ago, at one point we heard, and then I want to get to Ellie's story for the week. That her favorite story, is didn't one of the owners basically tell the players that he owned them and that he could
that was the former.
It was the Chargers.
LA Clippers.
No, it was the Clippers. Yeah, it was basketball. And
yeah, it was the LA Clippers, and then they booted him out.
And
but my point with
all these sporting teams, though, it's old white men.
Yeah, but my point is, like, you're an NFL player.
Every
and you can't get an apartment. If you're a black man or you're a black family, and you can't get an apartment as an NFL player, what hope does a UPS driver who happens to be black have for getting that? What hope does a black nurse or a black military man or a black, just a union guy in a shop? What hope do they have? Because they're going to get denied. It's like, oh, well, you. And if anybody who's ever rented in the LA market, I have. It's freaking hard. It was hard for me as a white man who was the head of ramp operations for American Eagle, making good money. And it was damn hard. It took me 6 months to get an apartment. And I had, at that time, my credit score was above 800. It was tough for me. And I didn't deal with redlining. It's like, the apartment I eventually got, I shot to the top of the list, and it was because I was white. Like, the owner basically let me know. It was just like, oh no, yeah, we're glad to see we can rent to you. I'm like,
those are some dog whistly words.
Yep.
Now they just shout them from a big ass bullhorn. They don't even use the dog whistle anymore.
I have to say, in New York, you think of places being very blue, very liberal. We moved here a couple years ago. I came from Montana, which has a lot of racism, but it's a lot, it's a lot of that like quiet racism. The thing that I noticed when I moved here was the systemic racism is very obvious, and it's just everybody is in the same roles that they were in pre like 1960s, right? So like everybody is still, you go in a building, and I've said this before, you go in a building and the guy in the elevator is white, but the guy pushing the elevator buttons is black, right? The guy shining the shoes is black. The guy getting his shoes shined is white. All the nannies are people of color. All the babies in the carriages are white. All the people who run laundromats are from Asian descent. It's like everybody has maintained these exacting roles that they were given, quote unquote given. And it hasn't changed, and everybody's just like fine with it to continue on like that forever. Like every guy you walk by, like I thought that the whole Trump persona and hairdo and everything of his kids, I thought that was just a weird, like, why are they still in the 80s? Like, why is this still a thing? You go down to the financial district and everybody looks like a Trump. They all have blue suits. They all have the weird long slicked back hair, but they're all white. And I was just like, man, everybody has been very specific roles, and the lines are just drawn and nobody crosses the lines. And why is that? Right? I hadn't seen that before. Now, again, I grew up in a very isolated, like the diversity where I grew up was not Black and Hispanic. It was more Native American and a lot of kids adopted from South Korea and that kind of thing. But much more sheltered from some of these narratives, right? The narratives that we had were cultural, and people still participate in their cultural heritage and that kind of thing. But But just seeing it blatantly, I was like, wow, I wonder why. Like, I wonder why we're still here. I know why we're still here, but it surprised me. It really surprised me. I was like, New York City, come on, like progressive, right?
Yeah.
That's my
I had a
Yeah.
history
You'd
professor.
think.
I'll real quick and then I'll let you jump, man. Like I had a history professor. We were talking about like the Hagia Sophia and a lot of this holy ground where it's like you dig down and you'll see like Roman, like it used to be a Roman or Greek temple, then the Romans, and then the Christians, and then the Muslims, and they all kind of go this has always stuck with me in terms of humanity and understanding systems. It's easier to change the name of the god than it is the practice.
Right.
You can put a different moniker on it. Affirmative action, woke, CRT. It's easier to change the name than the practice. And that's what you're seeing. That's why it's so damn hard. And that's why we talk about this stuff. That's why we have to teach the realities, because changing the systems, which you're talking about, human behavior, is much harder. Much harder.
This is why I encourage everybody to read up on Conway's Law, is because systems are designed how we base our base our communications on. So that the good software engineers, the engineers who care, who want to make software for good, or the folks in that industry who still mean something, all believe, or tend to all believe, in Conway's Law, which is systems or corporations and software are built on the way that their systems communicate. And that means how people talk too. That includes the people aspect. And that's what they know the most, is people are really important. So, and that's why we're going to keep talking about it relentlessly and openly. And that's why we don't sugarcoat it and we don't hide it, because it's important to say what's needed to be said when it's needed to be said in a vacuum of space that should not have a vacuum in it. Because I'll post a link, Sonny, once I shift over to Ellie's story for the week. Is we need to keep saying it really, really loudly, and we need to you guys, like, there's nearly 200 of y'all with us right now. There's other lives going on that are just as, if not more, uh, like larger accounts than ours, just as large and way larger than ours. And we're getting the same number because we have an incredible audience here who comes back and continues to come back because y'all are engaged. And it's a low bar for entry to engagement. And that's really what we're trying to help, is we want you guys to easily be engaged and understand it, and then be able to just take it home and say those same words, because it's not hard to say them once you know other people are saying them too. We want to make sure y'all have someone who gives you the power or gives you the opening to say it, because we're regular people. Like, I'm just a regular dude with a flag behind me. I'm a veteran who just cares. And that's about it. And that's where one of the reasons I actually reached out to Ellie. Like, that's one of my things that I like to do, communication systems, is I reach out to people. Like, I spoke to Dean Blundell yesterday, Fred and I did, because I fucking reached out to Dean one time and I was like, hey, do you want to come on? Oh, and eventually, after a couple weeks, back and forth between us and me, like actually being persistent in this and continuing to show interest, he came on.
Yep.
Same with Ellie, as I watched and I listened to her stuff and or read her articles. And I would love to know what your favorite article that you're either working on or have written this week is. And just any general thoughts on it.
Okay. Well, I did, I think 3 since we talked last. I did.
They're all good, by the way. Like, I listened to one last night. I also listened to the one you reposted yesterday,
Yeah.
about Ivana Trump, and
Oh yeah.
wow,
Yeah, right?
like,
Yeah,
more needs
that's
to
a
be
popular
known.
one.
Yeah, more needs to be known there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot
But
of
anyway,
questions. So this week I worked on a couple of things. And I generally, the reason I write an article, I'm not like, what should I write for an audience? I'm usually writing about something that I want to know about, and then like I will post it because I wrote it, kind of thing. Like, I want to know these things. I'm kind of doing the articles for selfish reasons. I want to know the history of something. I'm curious about like the investigative side of something, and then I'll also post it. And so this week I went back and because I'm always trying, now that this platform has got a little bit of traffic, I am trying to kind of keep victims at the forefront, right? And remember that this whole conversation about Epstein and Trump and missing files and flight logs and everything is about the victims first and about the accusers after. And recognizing who wants to remain private versus who wants to have, be front facing in public about their story, but never forgetting the actual stories and the numbers and how many there are. So the first thing I did was I mean, this was just silly, but I was gonna post an article that was a combination of the accusers who had come forward for Trump and Epstein, and then it took me 4 hours to just find all the accusers for Trump because there were so many. And I was like, oh, that was a naive thought that I thought I could put both people's, victims on the same page. So I just did Trump, and I went through and I had, I think, 31 women. And they ranged from Jane Doe, who was 13 and was involved with Epstein as well, to a lot of the girls who were in Miss Teen America or Miss Teen USA, who he would come back while they were naked in the back when 14, 15 years old. Some people were off the record, but they had court cases. Some people were very much on the record. One of them was the woman who has approached me in the past, and I still don't know if she's ever going to interview or want to do an article, but she keeps kind of playing cat and mouse with me, but I included her story in there. So I just laid it out. I love doing timelines and lists and putting things in order so people can see like how vast something is and it's all in the same place. So I started by doing that. And then a second article that I did as a kind of follow up was called If We Believed Women, right? Because there's this conversation about if we just believed women, we wouldn't need the files because
Nope.
if you lined up all the women who were involved with Epstein and Trump and let them tell their stories, that's everything that's in the files, right?
Yeah.
That's all in all the flight logs. That's every single bit of information about Epstein's island and the houses and the finances and everything. And so if we believed people and we just let them talk, then we have no need for files. And so I kind of riffed on that a little bit because I have a long history with my work of being a part of like the Me Too conversation. I was very heavily involved with the Weinstein story stuff and the women who wrote the Weinstein story, and then kind of the crossover with Ronan Farrow and his side of that, but also involvement with the Woody Allen story, and which also then crosses back over because Woody Allen knew Epstein. But just these conversations about people who have come forward and what that looks like for them. And ultimately, if you look at the statistics of many studies over decades, and not just in America, but in the UK and in Asia and everything, they're very consistent. A few things stuck out to me. Statistically, just in the US, about 500,000 cases of abuse come forward, women declaring abuse. 60,000 of those are them saying that their child was abused, right, by a perpetrator. But statistically, only 21% of the cases that are happening are ever reported. So you have to think about how many more people are out there who haven't reported. Of those, statistically, when you go to the police and the law enforcement, only 36% are believed by law enforcement. Now, I'm going to throw stats at you because I like stats. The world over, and for many decades, and intensified research through university research programs shows that when somebody reports that somebody has sexually abused them, the average, no matter where you look, what country you're in, age group, everything, the average for false reporting is somewhere between 2 and 8%. So if you think of women who are being believed at a 36% rate, but only less than 8% of them are actually false reports, that leaves a very, very large amount of women who are not being believed. Now, in cases of women coming forward and saying that children are being abused by a perpetrator, up to 73% of women lose custody of their child to the perpetrator after reporting child abuse. 73%. So there's not a lot of benefit for women to report abuse. And so there's this conversation of like, why didn't you go to the police? Why are you not, Christine Blasey Ford, why are you not reporting Brett Kavanaugh's, sexual advances at you 30 years ago? Like, why didn't you say something? And you have women who have to make a decision between, I see that this man is hurting other women and children, versus I'm going to say something and my life is now going to get worse for the rest of my life. Am I willing to make my life worse for the rest of my life in order to stop the person who's abusing more people? And that's what you see in these cases of like Weinstein, Woody Allen, Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, is you rarely see women as brave as Virginia Giuffre who come forward individually. Like that is a scary, scary situation because she could come forward and then nobody else may come forward. And it would be her being railroaded, right? Often, as you saw with Weinstein, you'll see women coming together to report or to go to the media or whatever in groups. And that is because they have made a decision outside and before they've said anything that we're all going to go and do this as a team and report this together because it's then safer for them. It gives them more credibility. Women do not statistically have credibility in any kind of reporting for law enforcement, for going to the doctor, basic things. They have much less credibility. And that is due to narrative, that's due to a lot of historical stuff. But also like the idea that they get railroaded after they report, right? You see a lot of these women who have reported sexual abuse from Donald Trump. They say, oh, they eventually withdrew their case. It's not because they changed their mind and was like, haha, just kidding, I lied. It has nothing to do with that. It's because they're now under threat of their entire lives being ruined because whether you're dealing with a powerful billionaire who has connections, or maybe you're just dealing with your husband or boyfriend, statistically, women make a lot less still in America and do not have the resources to protect themselves and get legal advice. Men generally have more tools. And so men generally win those cases. And so anyway, I kind of went on a long rabbit hole of like why women don't report and what that looks like and how if you look at the numbers of Epstein, if they're saying thousands of people have come forward and yet still only 21% of women report, like how many women are out there for him, for Trump, for this entire story? How many women are out there? So I kind of dug into that. But the other thing that I dug into this week was based on our last conversation is I did a story on Butler, Pennsylvania, because we talked about that. That is not something that I knew a lot about. Like I obviously knew the situation, but you then start to hear all the stories about Butler, Pennsylvania. Like, it was staged, it was this, it was that. And so me being the child of a conspiracy theorist, I'm very averse to conspiracies. Like I have one very practical parent and I have one very not practical parent. As mentioned, prior to Y2K, we had an entire room of our house dedicated to dry beans and rice, right? Like for the next year and a half, we were eating beans and rice. Like this has been my life growing up. And so when I look at a story like Butler, Pennsylvania, I want to know. I want to know what's conspiracy. I want to know what's truth. And I want to know what we don't know, right? And so I just went through the entire story beginning to end. I listened to what you guys said about like the ballistics. I then went to like look up ballistics experts and then like trauma doctors and like and what kinds of things made sense and what didn't make sense. A lot of what I learned from it is that the left side is probably just as conspiratorial as the right side as far as stories go. And much of that has to do with we just really, really, really want it to be a conspiracy because we want this guy to like go away. But there are very, very unanswered questions that someone needs to be accountable for. And one of those is the difference in reaction from the Secret Service. And when you look at the story of John Hinckley Jr., which we all know the name John Hinckley Jr., right? Who tried to assassinate Reagan. that was before I was born, and I know his name, right? I didn't know the names of the people, of the guy at Butler, Pennsylvania. I did not know the name of the guy who was hiding out on the golf course trying to shoot Trump. I don't know their names. Yet I know this guy who did it before I was born. That was the first thing that kind of keyed me in. But when you look at the assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan, you look at the video, the reaction of the Secret Service is throwing their body in front of the president. One guy got shot, but he's literally spread eagle in front of him, holding out his body to block a bullet, while the other ones slam Reagan to the ground, throw him in a car. The car screeches off, right? And from what I was reading with the Secret Service is in that moment, they have the authority over the president. So if the president says, no, I want to get up, they say, fuck you, punch you in the face, lie back down. They have the authority in that moment to do that because they're protecting the president of the United States. What we saw in Butler was, and I timed it, was he was behind the podium for 40 seconds. Somebody says, shooter's down. They allow him to pop up, pump his fist, and walk off the stage, grab his shoes. And I thought, that is very weird. That is very weird because how did you know this? I mean, you don't know the circumstances. How do you know there's only one shooter? We still ask that about like shooting. We still ask that about Kennedy. Was there another shooter? Like, why do we know 40 seconds later that there's not another shooter? How do we know that there's not going to be a copycat in the crowd who all of a sudden is brave enough to do it too because he saw something? Like, there was so many factors that was like, why would somebody let the president in an active shooter situation stand up and wave his fist? And there's two sides to that. One is, that it could be faked and they knew and everything was fine. The other is the authority of Donald Trump as a president versus presidents in the past. Before, the Secret Service had the position of being the authority in a crisis situation, in a shooter situation. Now, and as with any federal, sect of the government, Donald Trump holds all the authority. So if he's laying down and they're laying on top of him, if he says, get the fuck off me, they have to get off him. Whereas before, they would not. They'd be like, shut up. So that was one thing. They talk about all the mistakes made by the Secret Service. But I also think many of those things that were considered mistakes were things that Trump put in place as his own authority. So you think of the perimeter of this open giant fairground field that is surrounded by outbuildings that were, so easy to get on, hide behind, right? The perimeter is 450 feet. That is all they had to do for security and protection was 450 feet from the stage. And you look at the gun that this kid used, and it was called it was like an AR-15 style rifle, but it had a different name. But it has an accuracy of 1,800 feet. And
I gotta jump, guys. I've had a good talk, so I gotta hard out.
Talk to you later.
All right, hey, Ellie, it's great. Keep going.
Yeah, will do.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Fred.
So the idea of them having these real kind of limited security means in the first place, and then afterwards everybody kind of jumped on the Secret Service, is my assumption that those were put in place by Trump himself and not by the Secret Service, because their standards were way, way, way different. And then the director of the Secret Service immediately resigned after and all this. And so I think they kind of took a hit for Donald Trump. So that was very strange for me, but I didn't necessarily.
Before we go on, sorry to jump in. Before we go on, that is a really, really dangerous precedent that Donald Trump is setting. Ellie makes you make a really, really, really strong and good point from someone who has been in the armed services and understands what the Secret Service is like Ellie said, they have the authority, the constitutional authority to tell at this point, the president to fuck off. They can say no and punch him.
Yeah.
Literally punch the president in the gut. They've done it.
In order to keep him safe.
To facilitate the safe execution of their extraction. That's it. That is their sole purpose, is to protect with their own lives the president. which means they must get him out or her out
Right.
or them out
Right. He should have
first.
gone down the back of the stage and
Yes.
been taken away in a
Yeah.
vehicle, like immediately. Yeah.
What happened was a violation of everything of their oath.
Right.
And it shows that those who were around him, I think it was a test of who was most loyal
Yeah.
at the moment.
And that's a very Project 2025 thing, is like replacing everybody with only the people who will
Yeah.
absolutely be loyal to the president. I know a lot of people talk about the video of like the photographers being pulled in and how shady that looks. I don't really know how I feel about that. I think two things, like when you look back at the Reagan attempt, you have to remember that the guy filming the entire time was right there in front and he ran in with a
Mm.
camera. But you also have to remember that we live in a time where when our house is burning down, we're taking selfies of it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't really, the idea of pulling a photographer in front of a bullet, which the poor press, will never receive a Purple Heart for being shot in the middle of a crisis,
No.
is not unlikely that someone would pull some poor guy with a camera in and be like, get in now, take this picture. I think it's weird, but I don't think it's implausible. Some of the like ballistic stuff. So I went into like the injuries in depth of kind of an analysis of Trump's injuries versus the people behind him. Obviously Corey Compatore was killed because he was shot in the head. But you have
Mhm.
these two other guys who were hit a couple of times in like the liver and the spine. And kind of, you were talking about like the impact of the space around a projectile, right? And the energy that it creates. So when I was looking at the actual bullets, the bullets themselves, even though they're shot by a high-powered
Oh,
rifle, they
I
weren't
gotta
shooting.
go.
Oh,
I'm
do you gotta
getting
go?
I'm getting an invite from Dean Blundell to go live.
Oh, go do it. Go do it.
Hey, I love y'all. We'll talk
We'll
later.
come back.
We'll talk later. Thanks, Ellie.
Yeah, bye.
Oh shit, what the fuck?